morning, our dear viewers. Welcome to this news edition coming to you live and direct from Golfe TV Africa here in the city of Cotonou with Hazel OGOIGBE. Now to the news in detail, starting from the news in brief. The Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors on Tuesday suspended its planned nationwide daily protest after a closed-door meeting with the principal officers of this Senate. Now, the president of the Nigerian Association of Resident Doctors, Emeka Oji, made this known. Now, Oji, however, said there will be a review in the next 72 hours, and he says, I quote, "We met with the Senate President, majority and minority leaders, and the Chief Whip. So the planned protest slated to start on Wednesday has been suspended, and we will review it again in 72 hours. Now, the striking doctors had earlier planned to commence a daily peaceful protest starting from Wednesday if the government fails to meet their demands. Now, the decision followed the directive by the federal government of Nigeria to the chief medical directors and medical directors of the federal tertiary hospitals to commence the enforcement of the no work, no pay policy against the striking doctors. Now, the doctors embarked on an indefinite industrial action on the 26th of July following the failure of the Nigerian government to meet their demands. Now, the Nigerian doctors are demanding the implementation of the one-for-one replacement policy for healthcare workers, the Medical and Dental Council of Nigeria to discontinue the downgrading of the membership certificates issued by the West African Postgraduate Medical and Surgical Colleges. They're also demanding the immediate payment of all salary arrears, the implementation of the consolidated medical salary structure, a new hazard allowance, and the domestication of the Medical Residency Training Act, among other demands. Now, crossing away from that to the local scene, it's the summer holidays already in Benin Republic. Now, despite this holiday period, students are still taking part in extracurricular activities offered by schools. However, the purchase of school supplies for the coming academic year remains a major concern for parents. More information in the following report.
Preparing for the start of the new school year for your offspring is a strategy that every parent develops, but it also requires experience. For this mother, this important step was achieved by a fairly simple method, she confides, while calling on the government to offer loan facilities to parents. On the other hand, the prevailing economic gloom is forcing this mother to opt for a loan to cover her daughter's school fees. She also wants the state to help families in difficult situations.
On se prépare depuis parce qu'on sait que notre enfant ira à l'école, donc on se prépare, on cotise un peu.
We have been preparing since because we know that our children will be going to school, so we have been saving some money for the preparation of school reopening. As I get some money, I save up a little to get some of the things needed. That is how I have been doing, because I know my daughter will need books and pens, so I pay for that first, and I also pay for the uniforms because that is what she will put on to school. So I save up for that first. Sometimes the savings is not enough. We may also depend on loans if the state can also implement this so that parents can also take loans for their children's education. That will also be good. A teacher by profession, this parent says that he started buying school supplies in May to avoid purchasing the school supplies at a higher rate. It is all about organization, he says. A number of stalls selling supplies have been set up in and around Cotonou. For the time being, some parents are buying as much as they can afford.
Now, crossing over to the news in brief, talking about the situation of things in Niger. Now, the story says a decision by a bloc of West African nations to shut down their borders with Niger as a way of sanctioning its coup plotters is harming local businesses in northern Nigeria, where a cross-border economy has boomed over the years. Now, the bloc known as the Economic Community of West African States, ECOWAS, restricted financial transactions and shut the borders between Niger and its member nations as part of measures to force the coup plotters to reinstate the Nigerian president, Mohamed Bazoum, who was overthrown last month by soldiers in his presidential guard. But the sting of the sanctions against the transitional government is being felt on the other side, which is 1,600-kilometer long border in Nigeria. Sadly, Niger accounts for 75% of the total value of exports from Nigeria's cross-border informal trade, according to a study by the Central Bank of Nigeria. The bank's latest report in 2016 valued goods traded across the border with Niger at 828 billion naira in just a year. In Nigeria's northwestern coastal state, the border closure and restricted traffic on nearby roads left dozens of trucks stranded for days, most of them loaded with food items and other perishable goods. Prices of livestock, animal products, and some commodities usually supplied from the city of Maradi, Niger, have increased, local residents stated. Now, Nigeria's authorities are enforcing the restriction of movement across the border, but the measure has also impacted traffic in the surrounding areas, including truck drivers not heading to Niger but other border towns in Nigeria. Still on the news and breath, crossing over to this. The United Nations says the first humanitarian convoy to reach East Darfur has arrived, delivering 430 tons of agricultural seed. Now, briefing reporters in New York, the United Nations spokesperson Farhan Haq informed that the Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs negotiated the movement of these trucks from White Nile to Edine, the capital of East Darfur. According to Haq, the convoys delivered 430 tons of agricultural seeds provided by the Food and Agricultural Organization to be distributed to farmers across the state by the Ministry of Agriculture. Further, humanitarian access is urgently required so that all agricultural areas in Darfur can benefit from the provision of seeds. Now, all parties must also provide farmers access to agricultural land and ensure their protection as they plant and harvest their crops. Now, the delivery last week came as UN officials say the conflict in Sudan has left 24 million people, which is half of the country's population, in need of food and other major assistance. Now, this is a developing story. A batch of contaminated common cold syrup manufactured by an Indian company has been flagged down by the World Health Organization. Now, the latest in a series of warnings by the United Nations agency about substandard medicines from India. Now, the United Nations agency said the batch of the syrup, called branded Cold Out and found in Iraq, was manufactured by Force Laboratories for Derby Life Pharma. More information on the following report.
A batch of contaminated common cold syrup manufactured by an Indian company has been flagged by the World Health Organization, WHO, the latest in a series of warnings by the United Nations agency about substandard medicines from the country. On Monday, the WHO said the manufacturer and the marketer have not provided guarantees on the safety and quality of the product. The United Nations agency said the batch of the syrup, branded Cold Out and found in Iraq, was manufactured by Force Laboratories for Derby Life Pharma. It had higher than acceptable limit of contaminants diethylene and ethylene glycol, chemicals that can be fatal and lead to acute kidney failure in dozens of children. The batch had 0.25% of diethylene glycol and 2.1% of ethylene glycol, when the acceptable safety limit for both is up to 0.10%. World Health Organization said in its medical product alert. The alert about Cold Out is the latest warning issued in recent months about contaminated cough syrup sold worldwide. 4 types of medicine made in India caused the death of at least 70 children in Gambia last year, according to the country's Presidential Commission of Inquiry. According to the World Health Organization, the syrups contained unacceptable quantities of diethylene glycol and ethylene glycol, commonly used as antifreeze. In October 2022, Gambia recalled a number of medicines following the death of the children, including all cough and cold syrups in circulation, as well as all products manufactured by the Indian firm Maiden Pharmaceuticals, where the contaminated syrups came from. The inquiry concluded that the medicines had not been registered with the Medicines Control Agency prior to being imported as required by the regulations. The commissions also noted the urgent need to set up a quality control laboratory to carry out tests on all medicines imported into the country. The Health Minister pointed to a number of areas for improvement to ensure a better quality health system, such as the creation of a school of pharmacy at the university and stricter control of medicines in circulation. He also said that the Gambian government was exploring ways of taking legal action against the Indian pharmaceutical laboratory from which the drugs originated in order to obtain compensation. Following the health scandal, India shut down the Maiden Pharmaceuticals factory in northern India in October 2022. A trial on the case is due to open in Gambia in October.
Crossing over to South Africa, Cape Town's public transport system has been paralyzed by a minibus taxi strike that in a violent turn has seen 3 people killed, stated the police on Monday. Now, drivers of minibus taxis, the main mode of transportation for millions of working-class South Africans, blocked multiple roads in a strike that began last Thursday as a result of clashes with city authorities. Now, the South African National Taxi Council, SENTACO, called for the action over a new municipal bylaw that gives the city the power to impound vehicles over offences such as driving without a license, not displaying registration plates, or overloading. Tensions boiled over after 15 minibuses were impounded on Tuesday. Thousands of stranded commuters piled up at the bus and taxi station across the city on Thursday, with hundreds opting to walk home late into the night, while others slept at the stations as incidents of violence erupted. On the Ugandan scene, Uganda recorded a decline in inflation to its lowest rate in the last 15 months, according to state-run statistics agency.
Food inflation for items like cassava, maize flour, rice, bananas and chicken has declined. Uganda's Bureau of Statistics says this has led to a decline in inflation, the lowest since February 2022.
Specifically, we note that the petrol inflation has decelerated to minus 21.1% in the year that is ending July 2023, from that of 14.7% in June 2023. Diesel inflation on an annual basis decelerated to 21.0% in the year that is ending July 2023, from that of minus 16.5% in June, recorded in June 2023.
This is a relief for many market traders like Andrew Baze. They believe they can now make a better profit margin at reduced costs of transporting their produce from gardens in rural areas to the markets in the city.
The price of fuel determines the final cost of the products that we sell. It does not matter whether it's food or cement. The cost of fuel controls everything. We ask the government to pay attention to the price of fuel. It's the basis of all the issues.
The government says Uganda is on the path to recovery after the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic supply chain disruptions and recently the global economic shocks from the Russian-Ukraine conflict.
Growth is estimated at 5.3% for the fiscal year ending 22-23, up from 4.6% last financial year. This is shown by the agricultural sector recovery, resilience of the service sector, and considerable household consumption.
The Ministry of Finance also attributes the decline in inflation to the well-coordinated fiscal and monetary policy of the Bank of Uganda. Inflation is now below the central bank target of 5%, down from 10.7% in October last year. The main driver has been food, due to the favorable weather conditions that have helped farmers increase production.
Welcome back. You're still tuned into Golfe TV Africa, and this is the news with Hazel OGOIGBE. Now, crossing over to the African Newspaper Review, where we get to touch stories that are trending on the African scene. Now, today we're starting from Nigeria. We're starting from the front page of The Nation, Nigeria, and this story says, resident doctors set to end strike, parley with government raises hope. And I read the story. We talked about the report of the fact that resident doctors in Nigeria were about to embark on a strike today, being Wednesday, but they had a conversation with the government and then they have decided to end the strike. Now, this story says, the Central Bank of Nigeria hits Niger rep junta with sanctions. ACF opposes economic blockade. Military denies top U.S. and diplomats access. Now, the sad thing about the blocking of the talking about blocking of the borders between Nigeria and Niger is that there is always bilateral economic trade between Nigeria and Niger. So when Nigeria has limited the flow of goods and services, Nigerians across the border, that is in northern Nigeria, are actually hitting the sting because their goods cannot cross over to Niger, definitely leading to a loss on their path. Now, this story says federal government begins reforms to end 20 trillion yearly tax losses. That means there are a whole lot of Nigerians that actually do not pay their taxes. Now, we're looking forward to seeing how the federal government of Nigeria is definitely going to go about this. Now, if you know you're curious about that, you want to find out more stories that are trending, you could always check the pages of the Nation Nigeria. Now, crossing over from the Nation Nigeria, let's move over to the front page Liberia, touching the stories that are making the round on the front page Liberia. Okay, today on the front page Liberia. Now, let's start with the trending stories, and this one is staring me in the face, saying Alexander Benedict Cummings, the fixer. Let's just go. And the saying, this is where I'm reading from, it's saying, the former Coca-Cola executive says he's been overlooked most of his life, even with the odds stacked against him. He rose from the bottom of Africa's oldest republic to find his way into corporate America as a major player in one of the world's most popular brands. Now venturing into his second quest for the Liberian presidency, Mr. Cummings is employing the Jehovah's Witness door-to-door step style of campaigning in hopes of convincing Liberians that he is the best among the rest in the presidential race, defying conventions and expectations as a new player. Now, this is a story from grass to grace. He just rose and became a major player in one of the private industries. Now he's embarking for his aim and his dream to become the next president of Liberia. Still on the Liberian scene, Liberian government confirms turning over former Sierra Leonean police officer seeking refugee in Monrovia, forcefully removed from Liberia. And this is on the pages of the front page Liberia. Now, crossing away from the front page Liberia, let's quickly move over to the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana, seeing the stories that are making the front page of the Daily Guide Ghana. Okay, there we have it on the front page of the Daily Guide Ghana. And the top story reads, Cecilia stolen $1 million. Suspect bought 6 mansions and 2 cars. Somebody steals $1 million and the person decides to invest in houses and 2 cars. My prayer is that this person actually faces the wrath of the law. Now, this story says, headmaster chops BEC registration cash. Bogo court remands drug thieves, on pages 6 of the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana. And the story says minority chases BOG governors, on the pages of the Daily Guide Ghana. Now, moving away from the Daily Guide Ghana, my time is fast spent, but I think I can just take one more story before I end today's edition of the African Newspaper Review. Let's just quickly see the stories that are making the rounds on the front page of the Punch Nigeria very, very, very quickly. Now, on the pages of the Punch Nigeria, the story says, ECOWAS plans fresh sanctions on Burkina Faso, Mali, and United Nations talks fails. ECOWAS leaders meet on Thursday after botched African Union, United Nations, and U.S. planned visit to Niamey. Over 100,000 IDPs stranded in Niger and businesses grounded in Tokoto, Castina, and the borders. And the story talks about this and says, father blames hospital for elevator death, doctor buried, and Edo PDP sues for peace between Obaseki and Deputy 50 on pages 8 of the pages of the Punch Nigeria. And with this, dear viewers, this is where I conclude today's edition of the African Newspaper Review on Golfe TV Africa with Hazel OGOIGBE. Thanks for tuning in, and of course, enjoy the rest of your day.